Bueno, muchas gracias por acompañarnos en esta segunda sesión de la Cátedra José Gaos, que como saben está a cargo del profesor Franz Berto. El día de hoy nos va a hablar, bueno, su charla se titula Tension about Hyperintension. Ayer nos adelantó un poco sobre lo que iba a tratar. Y bueno, pues muchas gracias, Franz. Y...
Okay, so let's start. So lots of things to talk about today. So I need to move quickly. So today the talk has a first part, which will be formal. And in the first part, I will tell you about the recent objection to hyperintentionality in general, raised by Tim Williamson. And I told you yesterday, Tim being Tim, it's a tough objection. And I'll do what I can to try to answer the objection. Anyway, more is expected to come because I told you yesterday, Tim Williamson has started a campaign against hyperintentionality. So it's going to give us more work. But the most important part of the talk is the second part, where things will get a bit more technical, because I will introduce you and try to sell to you my favorite account of content, in particular propositional content. My view, or at least my current view, on when two sentences say the same thing, that is to say, they express the same propositional content. And you will see that in a sense, the idea is easy. It's about taking the standards possible words account, okay, the view that I mentioned yesterday, according to which a proposition is just a set of possible words where the proposition is still, and saying, well, that's just one part of what it is to be a proposition. You need more than that. The account that I will try to sell to you, I mentioned yesterday, is coming to be called two-component semantics. I told you that I would have liked to call it two-dimensional semantics, but the name was already taken, so I went for two-component. Two-dimensional would have been better because it gives you the idea that the two things are really independent from each other and irreducible to each other. So basically, I'll try to sell the idea that the proposition P is made of two things. The set of words where the proposition is true, that's the old bit, the usual truth set. And also, what the proposition is about. Its topic, as I will say, as they're also called sometimes, it's subject matter. I told you nothing on what topics are yet. That's what I'm going to do today. Good. So remember what we said yesterday. I told you we call an operator H hyperintentional when H phi, H psi, they can have different root values, even though phi and psi express necessarily equivalent contents. So they have the same intention, okay? Same function from possible words to extensions, which for sentences is just root values. And so propositional content P can be called hyperintentional when P can differ from another content Q, even though they are necessarily equivalent throughout the same possible words. And call a semantics hyperintentional when it accounts for some hyperintentional operator by postulating hyperintentional contents. So it's a hyperintentional account of propositional contents, as opposed to postulating other devices alien to content, like modes of presentations or guises, for instance, which were mentioned yesterday, right? Which are taken by people usually as extraneous to content. They're not part of semantics. They're part of pragmatics or cognition or whatever. Okay. Good. And that's the key of everything, because we will come to this next week. Once you have a certain hyperintentional account of propositions, you can build hyperintentional epistemic logics or formal epistemologies on it. Because, well, propositions are the things that can be known, believed, supposed. Okay. So first you need a hyperintentional account of propositions to then give an hyperintentional account of what it is to believe a proposition, to know a proposition, to suppose a proposition, and so on. Yeah, that's what I just said. Good. And we're going to keep this question in the background. It already popped up yesterday. How hyper are hyperintentions, right? Because the first characterization you get of hyperintentionality is merely negative. It just says more fine-grained than intentions. And then the next question is, how much more fine-grained? Okay. We'll keep this in the background because part of the Williamsonian objection is that hyperintentionalists are on a kind of slippery slope here. Okay. They won't manage to find the natural stopping point in the fine graining, and at the same time to give a scientifically serious account of meaning. Okay, so here's the Williamson objection. It goes under the level of objection from overfitting. He thinks that we hyperintentionalists are guilty of overfitting. So his campaign is similar. You know, when the intentional revolution started, okay, one of the greatest living philosophers back then was an enemy of intentions, right? That's fine, right? He had this famous campaign against modal logic and intentions and possible worlds. With all the pioneer rhetoric, you know, modal logic was conceiving, seeing the scene of confusing object language and meta language, right? It commits you to intentional entities, but these are creatures of darkness because they lack clear identity conditions. All of the pioneer rhetoric. So, and yet, good arguments, of course. Okay. Now the situation is similar. The hyperintentional revolution is being objected to by one of the greatest living philosophers, Tim Williamson. Well, we know how it works with Bryan. Let's see how it goes with Williamson. Okay. Overfitting. So there's a general characterization of overfitting, not just in philosophy or in logic. It's just a bad feature of theoretical models. Okay. So overfitting means the excessive liberalization of models by the addition of parameters to account for all the patterns that one thinks one finds in the data. So you got a bunch of data, they're all over the place. You want to build a model. Okay. Could be a function. Okay. Can be a very simple linear function. That's not going to fit the data very well. That's called underfitting. Okay. Or you may have a more complicated curve that fits the data a bit better. But you may overcomplicate your function so that you pick all the points. Okay. And at some point, you're just overfitting. You're just tweaking your function so that it intercepts all the data points. Okay. But there's going to be some noise in the data. Some data are going to be unreliable. So your model is bad for that reason. Okay. It incorporates bad data and noise into what you're aiming to model. Williamson thinks that the hyperintentionalists are guilty of overfitting. He thinks that, well, that's his view. So hyperintentionalists complicate standard possible semantics. Okay. Any hyperintentional account of propositional contents is going to be typically more complicated than simply the view that propositions are sets of possible words. I told you yesterday there's many hyperintentional accounts on the market. Some have a long tradition. For instance, structured accounts of propositions, right? Like Russellian structures. So the view that propositions are structures made of the denotations of the relevant subsentential components. So the sentence, Socrates is a philosopher, expressed as a structured proposition. For a Russellian, that's literally made of things, the individual Socrates, the property of being a philosopher, lumped together somehow. There's many other hyperintentional accounts I told you yesterday, but typically they're more complicated. They involve more complicated models than plain possible word semantics. And Williamson says these views complicate standard possible word semantics because of intuitive data on speakers' patterns of acceptance and rejection of sentences, which seem to provide counterexamples to mere intentionality. Okay. That's how I tried to motivate the view yesterday, for instance. I told you, oh, look at the standard account of counterfactual conditionals, the one due to Lewis and Maker, that uses standard possible word semantics, right? And it makes all counterpossibles, all counterfactuals with impossible antecedents trivially true. But that seems unintuitive. I gave you the Daniel Nolan example on Hobbes and so on, because our intuitions are such that, well, we seem to accept some, we seem to reject some others. Okay, that's the way in which hyperintentionality is typically motivated. We appeal to intuitive data on sentences that we tend to accept as competent speakers of the language, sentences that we are prone to reject. Okay, but, says Williamson, the data are generated by fast and frugal heuristics, cognitive processes that we put in place when we assess sentences, which are reliable in general most of the time, but which are probably unreliable or inconsistent precisely in the cases which were supposed to motivate the hyperintentional need for fine graining. Okay, so he borrows this metaphor of fast and frugal heuristics from cognitive psychology. Okay, like, you know, Kahneman and Tversky's cognitive heuristics. They do fine most of the time, but they get you in trouble in special cases. Okay, they're similar to, like, I don't know, perceptual illusions. Mostly what we perceive, we judge in the right way, but then there are all of those famous illusions that fool you. Okay, that's because we have a heuristics, cognitive heuristics in place to interpret our perceptual stimuli. Okay, he wrote the whole book called Suppose and Tell: The Semantics and Heuristics of Conditionals, in which he defends the supremely unpopular view that the indicative if is the material conditional. Okay, that was supremely unpopular. Okay, there were like a couple of defenders of the view until Williamson came up with a book 3 years ago. And also he has an account of the counterfactual in that book, according to which the counterfactual is what you get when you add to the material conditional a would operator. So the counterfactual is basically a would if operator, but the would he has is a normal model operator. You can formalize it in normal model logic, so standard model logic. So that one is intentional, not hyperintentional. And the indicative conditional is not even intentional, it's merely extensional. Okay. So he has a very smart defense of the view. And what about evidence against the material conditional analysis, right? Because that's why the view is so unpopular, because it seems to be clashing very hardly with our intuitions on which indicative conditionals are acceptable, which are not acceptable. So he tries to argue that evidence against the material conditional analysis of the indicative if is generated by fallible cognitive heuristics that we put in place in our assessment of conditional. A famous one that he considered is the heuristic that prescribes that you accept a conditional when you accept the conditional plainly, when you accept the consequent under the supposition of the antecedent. Okay, that is sometimes called the Ramsey test, because Ramsey had this legendary footnote in General Propositions and Causality where he says, oh, this is how we assess an indicative conditional if phi then psi. We suppose that phi, Ramsey says, we hypothetically add phi to our system of beliefs and then make minimal adjustments for consistency and see whether the consequent pops up. Okay. So if you accept the consequent under the supposition of the antecedent, then you accept the conditional. Okay, that's the heuristic. Williamson has sophisticated arguments showing that that's inconsistent. So it leads you to accept inconsistencies when you explore deductive consequences of your supposition. And he also has arguments to the effect that it's probabilistically inconsistent. And his arguments are similar to the notorious triviality results due to Lewis and other people. Lewis wrote this famous paper in the 70s called Probabilities of Conditionals and Conditional Probabilities. That's an awesome paper. Okay, that's really, that's the genius of Lewis. So he shows that if you assume that the probability of an indicative is the same as the probability of the consequent conditional on the antecedent, which is a natural assumption, you get a triviality result. So the probability of any conditional is the probability of the consequent, which is crazy. Okay, that's called the famous triviality result. So Williamson has this kind of arguments too. He also wrote a paper then later in which he tells the same story on attitudes and attitude descriptions. So we have heuristics for attitude descriptions, for ascribing belief, knowledge to somebody. Okay, guy knows that P, somebody believes that Q, and so on. And he says that since at least Kripke's famous puzzle of Pierre, which you may be familiar with for attitude descriptions, we should have known that our attitude descriptions also feature occasionally inconsistent heuristics. For instance, the heuristic that prescribes that one will assent to phi if and only if one believes that phi, if one is sincere, of course. Okay, that one, he argues, also gives inconsistent results of the Kripke's Pierre kind. And his conclusion there is that, well, we hyperintentionalists are people who fall for the danger of giving semantic solutions to epistemic problems. So we postulate distinctions at the level of content to accommodate certain cognitive epistemic data. But they don't belong in semantics. That's just cognitive psychological procedures, and they are inconsistent. And to accommodate these things, we make a mess of the semantics. Okay, that's kind of the view. Now that view is complete. It clashes with the way semanticists do semantics normally. Okay. That's not a refutation of Williams. I just mentioned the fact that he agrees on that. Because if you open any textbook of semantics, like Kierkegaard, McConnell, or Hyman Kratzer, they're going to tell you at the outset in the preface that a key task of semantics is to capture competent speakers' intuitions of synonymy, antonymy, what means the same things, what means opposite things, entailment, equivalence between sentences, presupposition, and so on. Okay, they're going to tell you, well, that's where we start from when we do linguistic semantics. Now, everybody agrees. I mean, where else could you start from? Right? A priori intuitions, self-evident axioms. You're going to start from by looking at how people speak, right? Now, everybody agrees that no theory can take on board all our intuitions because they're bound to be inconsistent. But, I mean, in the unfortunate case that dialecticism is wrong, not several semantics can be inconsistent, right? But as remarked, for instance, by Rothschild in a very nice review of Williamson's book, which came out in Mind, Williamson instead takes the intuitive judgments delivered by our cognitive procedures, not as a guide to the semantics, but as things that have to be explained on their own, even in clear disagreement within those three of content. Okay. Again, that's not an objection to Williamson. Okay? He says that explicitly. So semanticists are guilty of overcomplicating semantics in order to account for cognitive phenomena which belong to psychology, cognition, general epistemology, if you like. They don't belong in an account of content. I mean, if you're familiar with Williamson's famous defense of bivalence against non-classical logics, it's the same pattern, right? Because Williamson said, oh, people abandon bivalence because they want to account for phenomena which have to be accounted at the cognitive level. Because for Williamson, vagueness actually is an epistemic issue. So don't change the semantics to explain vagueness. Don't change the logic, okay? It belongs to epistemology. Okay. Now, of course, you can play the game. So, called underfitting the oversimplification of models, neglecting good data. So we hyperintentionalists claim that possible semantic is too simple, and by being too simple, it neglects certain data that we may be interested in modeling. So here the crucial question is, what the hell are the good data? Because we all agree that some data are bad, and I hope we all agree that some data are good. So it's difficult to sort them out. Here's some good data that I think standard possible word semantics doesn't account for on its own. It offends what Steve Diablo has called our sense of when sentences say the same thing. They express the same contents. Okay. It's not sufficient to capture same. What it means that two different sentences express the same proposition as opposed to two different propositions. He said that at the very beginning of a book that I love, which is called Aboutness. Okay, I'll talk about aboutness a lot today. Sure, it's our sense. So the distinction supposedly missed by standard possible word semantics will be motivated by our fallible judgments of when sentences say the same and when sentences say different things. But again, what else is one to start from in semantics? I try to argue that some data here are not easily explained away. They may be stable across sentences of different kinds and model profiles, systematic, and such that accounting for them at the level of content gives explanatory virtues unmatched by alternative accounts that stick hardly to possible semantics and put any further distinction that you want to make outside of semantics somewhere else in the realm of modes of presentation or whatever. Okay, now I'll give you a bunch of groups of sentences which are necessary of the same kind of necessity, or co-necessary, co-intentional, they have the same intention, but which intuitively don't seem to say the same thing at all. They say different things. They speak about different stuff. For instance, P plus 2 equals 4, P plus 3 equals 6, equilateral triangles are equiangular. they're all mathematical necessities, right? If you take mathematical truths as unrestrictedly necessary, so they true across the whole model space in all possible worlds, that's most people's view. Well, they are co-intentional, right? But they don't seem to speak about the same thing, right? Only one is about, let's say, the topic of equilateral triangles. I will start speaking of topics by using boldface. I haven't told you what topics are yet. I'll tell you later. But that seems to be what 3 is about, not what 1 and 2 are about. If they're about anything, 1 and 2 are about numbers. 1 is about what 2 and 2 add up to. 3 is about what 3 and 3 add up to. 3 is about equilateral triangles, and it's made true by how these things are. You can't use 1 or 2 to speak about triangles without changing their meaning. That's the intuition. Peter is a dog, Kitty is a cat, water is H2O. For lots of essentialists, these are metaphysical necessities. Some people think that being a dog is essentially a property of Fido, given that Fido is a dog. So Fido has that property in any possible world in which he exists. And so for water is H2O, famous examples. But only 1 is about water, right? And it's made true by how water is like. You can't use 4 to speak about what water is like. If it snows, then it snows. Either South Bend is in Indiana or not. The liar sentence is not both true and false. Sorry, Bryan. I mean, he agrees with that. That's true for him. It's also true that it is true and false, but that's okay. These are classical logical necessities. Okay? Only 1 speaks about the liar, right? Open sets are sets which are both open and closed. That's a standard definition from topology. Non-normal model logics are model logics weaker than K, the weakest normal model logic, right? These are definitional necessities, if you want to call them that way. Only 1 is about open sets, right? If you ask a student, give me the definition of open sets, and the student says, non-normal model logics are model logics within K, then that's the question, right? It's not good to say, oh, but what I uttered expresses the right proposition, the one proposition which is the total set of words. Grass is green, that grass is green is true. Arguably, they are co-intentional, because we know our tasking, right? Grass is green if and only if it is true that grass is green. So they are true at the same possible world. But only 1 is about the proposition. This one is about the proposition that grass is green, and it says of that proposition that it's true. This one is not about the proposition, it's about grass, the color of grass, or something like that. Can the desired distinction be made merely intentionally? Can we use merely intentional tools to distinguish these contents? One may say, well, that equilateral triangles are equiangular, and that 2 + 2 + 4 can be told apart by using extensions or maybe mere intensions, which was those of the subsentential constituents of the relevant sentence. That would be a way. So you could say, suppose that the predicate equiangular, that's an intention, that's a function from possible words to extension, right? Takes a possible word, spits out the set of things of which the predicate is true at that word. That's standard extension of a predicate. Suppose embedded in the form of proposition, but not in the latter. But that's a hyperintentional view of content, not a mere intentional one. It's probably in the ballpark of structured propositions. Because that equilateral triangles are equiangular, and that 2 + 2 + 4, they keep being true at the same possible worlds, but now they're distinct because they feature distinct constituents. So if you buy this view, it's true that in a sense you're using only intentional resources to distinguish the contents that you want to distinguish, but now your position is incompatible with the claim that contents are just set of words, which is the claim of standard performance in mind. Okay? So you're already in the hyperintentional territory. Okay, so how would Williamson reply to this? So in the paper, he discusses putative hyperintentionality in metaphysics. He doesn't like hyperintentionality in metaphysics. He doesn't like grounding theory and stuff like that. Okay. He's clashing hard against Define on this now. Take these, he has these kind of examples. So these are pairs of sentences such that in each case, we are inclined to accept the even ones and to reject the odd ones, okay? So it's essential to Socrates that he is Socrates. That sounds good. It's essential to Socrates that he is a member of Singleton Socrates. That's again the famous hit-find example against nearly model analysis of essence, right? The proposition that it snows is true because it snows. It snows because the proposition that snows is true. This one sounds good, that one sounds bad. Mary brought it about that John was a contributor, sounds good. Mary brought it about that John was a self-identical contributor, doesn't sound good. He was already self-identical, right? It's not that Mary did something to make him self-identical. But these are all co-intentional, right? We are inclined to accept only the even items. There's an explanatory asymmetry going on here, says Williamson. For instance, Socrates' existence and identity grounds the existence and identity of its singleton. That's the famous Define argument again. Truth is grounded in facts, not the other way around. But then, says Williamson, we have the same inclination towards these pairs. We tend to accept the even ones and to reject the odd ones. There is a vixen because there is a female fox. That sounds good. There is a female fox because there is a vixen. Doesn't sound good. Richard brought it about that Edward was a king. Sounds good. Richard brought it about that Edward was a male monarch. Sounds bad. He was already a male. But, says Williamson, these differ pairwise only by substitution of synonymous subsentential constituents, right? Because that's the only difference between them. Female fox means vixen. King, male monarch. That's what it means. So they cannot have different contents. They cannot express different propositions because you can obtain one from the other by mere substitution of a subsentential component, which is a synonym of another one. Right? So Williamson said, there's something wrong with our intuition then. Our intuitions are wrong here. It may well be, he says, that superficial linguistic features can easily deceive us into accepting unsound arguments for hyperintentionality. Okay, these are mere superficial linguistic differences. Don't postulate the distinction at the level of content because we have different attitudes. We tend to accept one or the other. It's the attitudes that we have which are wrong. Diagnosis in explanatory reasoning, the psychologically salient directional explanation is from the simpler to the more complex, or from the more to the less familiar. He says the helpfulness of a putative explanation is sensitive to its superficial linguistic form. For explanations are meant to provide understanding. How far they do so depends partly on their superficial linguistic features. The proposition that it snows is the longer sentence that it snows, and grasping its meaning involves having some idea of what a proposition is. That's why 16 above look better than 17. Oh, sure, female fox is 2 words, vixen is only 1, but the former 2 words are more familiar than the latter. Okay, female fox, familiar jargon, vixen, less familiar. If you're not a native speaker, you may never have heard about the vixen, but the vixen is just a female fox. Yeah. Okay. How do we reply to that? I don't think that works against hyperintentionality, of course. And in this debate, it's the other camp which is defending the universal claim. It's the hyperintentionalists who are defending the existential claim. Okay, so we only need some counterexample to survive for the claim to go through. I mean, at least if that's supposed to be a general strategy against hyperintentionality, he may have a more divide and conquer strategy. Okay, so some putative examples I explain away this way, other putative examples I explain away in another way, but that strategy can't work in all cases. This is what I'm going to claim. Because the hyperintentional claim is existential. Some distinct propositional contents P and Q ultimately the same possible words. Now, first, the relevant intuitions, the ones that I push when I give you my own list of co-intentionals which say different things, they connect the contents of sentences to what they are about. And what's aboutness? Says Diablo, page 1 of the book. Aboutness is the relation that meaningful items bear to whatever it is that they're on or off, or that they address or concern. What meaningful items are about? is called their subject matters, or as I also like to call them, their topics. There's a burgeoning literature on subject matters and topic and subject matter sensitive semantics. There are different ways to approach topics. Here's a famous one. Some link topics to questions that sentences can be taken as answering in a certain conversational context. Lewis himself came up with an account of subject matters or topics in a couple of the very famous papers. One is statements partly about observation. And he linked subject matters to questions. Okay. So think about the conversational context. We're talking about something. We're addressing a certain issue. Okay. That's our subject matter topic. Here's an example of a topic: the number of stars. That's his own example. We're talking about the number of stars. Whenever you have a subject matter or a topic in conversation, there's always a question in the vicinity, an issue that we are addressing. Okay. In this case, the natural question connected to that topic is, well, what's the number of stars, right? Now that question determines a partition of the set of possible worlds. So just a division into subsets, okay? No overlap. Each world is going to end up in one cell. And when you take all the subsets together, they cover the whole thing. This is partition. Okay? And in the partition, two possible worlds end up in the same cell when they agree on the answer. So all the 0-star worlds in one cell, all the 1-star worlds in another cell, all the 2-star worlds in one cell, and so on. And that's what topics of subject matter are. There's just partition. So you start with the usual good old possible worlds. Okay. Topics are things we talk about in conversation. They are always connected to questions, and questions give you partitions. So that's what's a subject matter for Lewis, a Lewisian subject matter, a partition of modern space. On the other hand, we also, any good old thing can be a conversational topic, right? We can say things like, our topic in this lecture is neural networks. That's what we're going to talk about, neural networks. Or we can say, today we will talk about Margaret Thatcher. That's our topic. Okay. So there are other approaches to topic which are more object-oriented, especially old ones like Goodman. Goodman had an old approach to subject matters. Perry. Some others are oriented towards states of affairs or situations. These are the things we talk about in conversation. Kit Fine's subject matter sensitive semantics makes a lot of things that it calls states, truth makers. I'll talk a little bit about this too. He takes topics as given by states, or what he calls exact truth makers or exact false makers. So there are 10 stars, for instance, is a sentence which can be about a certain situation, a state. And states, according to him, unlike possible words, are small, they're not maximal, and they're wholly responsible and relevant for the truth of the sentence. Okay. Whenever you have a subject matters, there is nothing internalistic about aboutness. So you're not committed to an internalistic view of contents. Because what makes meaningful items meaningful, that they are about some topic, is that they hook out to the world. Okay. Next, after the super quick intro to subject matters or topics, back to Williamson appeals to our sensitivity to superficial linguistic structures, syntactic simplicity and complexity, familiarity with some terms rather than others, can't plausibly work, or so I claim, for all of the above cases, the cases that I gave you in my initial lists. T plus 2 equals 4, 3 plus 3 equals 6. Look at those two sentences. They have the very same syntactic structure. Okay. They're all identity claims. One of the terms is given by an operator. And it's a very simple syntactic structure, right? So for Peter is a dog and Kitty is a cat. A simple subject predicate sentences. So you can't invoke the fact that in one case you have more syntactic complexity, in the other case it's simple. Neither includes words less familiar than the other, right? Dixon may sound less familiar than Philip Fox to the average English speaker, but it would be preposterous to suggest that people are generally more familiar with the numeral 2 than with the numeral 3. Okay? So you can't say, oh, this one involves unfamiliar terminology rather than that one. Or with dog than with cat, right? It's not that dog is a very unfamiliar word and cat is a very familiar one. Still, one who says that feed is a dog hasn't said that feed is a cat. One who says that 3 and 3 add up to 6 hasn't said that 2 and 2 add up to 4, even though they have said something necessarily equivalent to that, but they haven't said the same thing. Note that the cases above involve considerations of explanatory conspicuity. They have been presented unembedded for your intuitions to grasp them. Not in context involving operators type explanatory reasoning. It's not even directly about patterns of ascent and descent, because qua competent speakers of English, in possession of the relevant truthful information, we could accept all of the above. It may all sound acceptable to us. Still, we don't think that they say the same. We may be rationally committed to accepting them all, because they're true, necessarily true, logically entailed by other truths, necessarily equivalent to them and to each other, or whatever. But still, we take them as expressing distinct contents for the plain reason that they're about different things. You may even bring an operator who says the same as, and come up with inconsistent folk judgments on sentences of the folk that phi says the same as that psi. But you can always play that game. You can play that for anything. One can come up with inconsistent intuitions involving more or less any operator. But how are we to overrule judgments of non-same saying in all of the above cases? Again, if you ask a teacher to mention some feature shared by all equilateral triangles, a student who answers, well, 2 plus 2 plus 4, they're going to get a bad mark. They can't get away by saying, yeah, what I said expressed the requested content, the one necessary proposition, modulo the cognitive illusions ordinary speakers are taking. Asked to spell out the chemical composition of water, the student who answers by asserting that feed is a dog is not going to get away either. Okay. Now, when you consider these examples, the Williamsonian talk of fast and frugal heuristic generating illusion, taken from cognitive psychology, starts to look misleading. Because if you take the famous cognitive illusions from cognitive psychology, like the Kahneman-Tversky conjunction fallacy, you know the story, right? So people are prone to judge a conjunction more likely than one of the conjuncts. So they give you the short story about Linda. They say Linda was very activist in the feminist movement. She studied philosophy, blah, blah, blah. What's more likely? That Linda is a bank teller, or that Linda is a feminist and a bank teller? Most people say that Linda is a feminist and a bank teller. But that can't be, right? Because a conjunction cannot be more likely than one of the two conjuncts. But when I explain to you the mistake, if you made that mistake, you're going to understand the explanation. You're going to say, oh, yeah, right, I was wrong. I got the wrong intuition there, right? That's what everybody concludes when you explain to them the conjunction fallacy. It's not that easy to explain away the putative illusions that Williamson appeals to. It's not easy to come up with an explanation that will make a competent speaker accept that when they say that 2 plus 2 plus 4, and they follow suit by adding that equilateral triangles are equiangular, they have said the same thing twice, save for superficial linguistic structural cognitive salience. So the intuition of saying same seems to be fairly robust. Okay, let's see, I'm really with time. Horrible. I'm gonna have to skip guys and guys. Yeah, I know. Maybe let's see if I have time left. Because I need to present you my 2-component account proposition. That's gonna be crucial because starting next week I'm gonna work with this stuff a lot. So we use declarative sentences to say true things about things. One addresses a certain topic in conversation and says that things are such and so with respect to them. For instance, one says, Midori is an accountant. One talks about Midori's job, what Midori does, or just Midori. What one says is true just in case Midori's job is or includes being an accountant. So I propose that we understand the proposition as I anticipated to you earlier. Proposition is a pair. It's made of two things. The truth set, that's the old bit. The set of words where the proposition is true. And it's also made of a topic, what the proposition is about, or directly true. So the first bit is the old one, the old set of words. Diablo calls this a thin proposition, because that's the thing, it's not enough. Okay. The whole proposition for me also features a topic. That's what Diablo would call the thick or directed proposition. A proposition that has direction. It is directed towards a certain topic or subject matter. Topics have parts, they form a natural mereology. Mathematics includes arithmetic, for instance. Mathematics and philosophy overlap. They share subject matter, certain parts of logic. So what a proposition is about can overlap with or be properly included in what another is about, what another one is about. That gives me the idea of same. When two sentences say the same, express the same proposition. Say more when what the sentence expresses includes what another sentence expresses, and maybe the former one also expresses and says more. Easy. We've got two components, right? Truth set topic. So phi says at least as much as psi. When first phi entails psi, we each can understand the usual way. All phi worlds are psi worlds. And what phi is about includes what psi is about. Phi and psi say the same, they express the same proposition. When they are co-intentional, same truth set, and also they're about the same things. Next, most people most people who work on subject matter sensitive semantics think that the truth functional logical vocabulary should be topic transparent. So negation, conjunction, disjunction, they have no subject matter of their own. I'll get back to this various times. I'll first give you the view, and I'll try to motivate it also in the coming days. That means that what not phi is about should be exactly whatever phi is about. Grass is green is exactly about what grass isn't green is about. Could be grass, the color of grass, the greenness of grass, what grass is like. But it certainly is not about not. It doesn't speak about negation. That doesn't mean that negation is ineffable. You can't speak about negation. You can say negation flips truth and falsity, for instance. That's about negation. Okay? But grass isn't green is not about negation. Conjunction and disjunction merge topics. Carlos is short and handsome. Carlos is short or handsome. They're about the height and looks of Carlos, both of them. So the topics of phi and psi and phi or psi, they're the same. They're the fusion of the topic of phi and the topic of psi. I say fusion, I'm using methodological terminology. Here's how we make the thing formally precise. Take a simple propositional language. So super simple, okay? It just has a countable set of atomic sentences, P, Q, R, and so on. Negation, conjunction, disjunction. Then I'm going to add the box of necessity and these two place operators and the auxiliary symbols. These two are the new bit. I'm going to use phi, psi, chi as metavariables for formulas. These are the welfare formulas are the atoms and all of these. Here's how you read these two. This one says phi and psi have the same topic, so they are about the same things. This one says the content of psi is part of the content of phi. And so same thing, it's just two-way content inclusion. Phi and psi say the same thing. Each one includes the other one. Okay, I'm going to use X, Y, Z, and so on for topics, W, and so on for possible worlds, and capital P, Q, R for propositions. Propositions in my sense, okay? Thick propositions made of two things. We recursively assign a thick proposition, bracket, square bracket phi, to all the well-formed formulas of the language. So I'm going to use this notation. Ceiling brackets, floor brackets. Oh, there we are. Floor brackets, ceiling brackets. Okay. Floor brackets, that's just the truth set of phi, the set of words where it's ceiling brackets, that's the topic of phi. Okay, that's slick notation that I did to Peter Hook. You find it in chapter 2 of the book that I mentioned yesterday, Topics of Thought, that came out last year. I forgot to mention yesterday that the book is open access. So if you go to the OUP website, you can download the PDF for free. So go there, download it. If you don't like it, at least you didn't waste any money. So that's only that formal stuff here is only in that chapter 2. Okay, so a frame for our language is a people. It's made of 3 items. W, the usual non-empty set of possible words. Nothing new there. T is just a set of topics. It's super abstract. I'm not going to take a stance on what topics are, whether they are partitions, whatever you like. Okay, just a bunch of things. Okay. They only need to obey minimal mereological constraints. The third item is an operation on topics. Understand it mereologically. It's few. It takes 2 topics, it merges them together. So it's idempotent, commutative, associative. Okay. So if you take the set of topics with that operation, it just joins in my lattice. For simplicity, fusion is unexpected. Just to make things simple. Whenever you have two topics, you can always merge them together and you get another topic. Okay. That gives you crazy fusions of topics, like my left ear and the Tour Eiffel. Okay. But that's just to make things simple. Okay. Then you can define topic partout. What it means that a topic is a part of another one. Topic X is part of topic Y, just in case the fusion of X and Y is Y. So you define partout by fusion. Partial ordering. A model asks the frame two interpretation functions, because the two components are independent. So they come with two interpretation functions. One assigns truth conditions and the other one assigns topics. They work independently. To each atom P, the first one assigns the truth set. So C of P is just the truth condition. It's the set of words that's which P is true. Nothing new there. Okay. And the second one assigns a topic to the atom. Distinct atoms can be about the same topic. Okay, that makes sense. Different atomic sentences can speak about the same thing. You extend the thing recursively to the truth functional composites as follows. Left-hand side just gives the usual Boolean algebra of three propositions, corresponds to the usual truth functional vocabulary. Again, nothing new, right? Negation is the complement. The set of words where not finds through the set complement of the set of words finds through. Conjunction is the intersection, disjunction the union, business as usual. The right-hand side is the recursion of topics, which ensures the topic transparency. It just stipulates the topic of not phi is the same as that of phi. Phi and psi, phi of psi is just a fusion of the topic of phi and the topic of psi. Good. These are a bit more complicated. I only give truth conditions for this, not topic. So idea globally in the sense that when they express the truth, they express the necessary truth. Again, that's just to make it simple. So the content of phi includes that of psi. That's true when, guess what? The truth set is included. So the set of words that phi is true is a subset of the set of words that psi is true. And also the topic of psi is included in the topic of phi. Okay. Otherwise, that's false. Box phi, that's true. And if so, it's a necessary truth. Just in case phi is true at all possible words, so it's a necessary truth, otherwise that's false. Phi and psi have the same topic, that's true, and if so, it's a necessary truth. If you can only guess what, phi gets assigned the same topic as psi. Otherwise, that's false. Why do I only give truth sets? Well, we only care about the truth conditions of this, and more importantly, I have no idea how topicality may work for this. I'm very convinced that the extensional truth functional vocabulary is topic transparent, but I have no idea on the topic of model vocabulary and so on. I don't know what the box is about. That's all. That's an open problem for subject matter sensitive semantics. So relative to the interpretation in the model, the T content of T proposition, what the formula phi says, is just a pair truth set topic. Okay. Good. Yeah, and then logic entailment, logical consequence, and logical truth get a completely standard definition. Entailment is truth preservation at all worlds of all models, and logical truth is truth at all worlds of all models. Totally standard. Okay. These are some validities and invalidities delivered by the semantics. I'll go through many of these in detail, and I'll try to show that these give a good account of same when it is that two sentences say the same thing or express the same proposition. A core principle of topic-sensitive semantics is that saying that should transmit down to the parts of what one says. When you say something, you have also said all the parts of the things that you have said. But it doesn't transmit to the same intent, to the mere entailments. Aisha says, Midori is tall and thin. Bethany says Midori is tall. What Bethany has said has already been said by Aisha, who has also said more, that Midori is thin as well. You may wonder why Bethany said that after Aisha, but that's an issue left to pragmatic. But Bethany has not thereby said that Midori is tall or a footballer. Sure, that easily follows logically from what she said. Okay, because disjunction introduction. Bethany may be rationally committed to that claim too, supposing one is committed to all the logical consequences of what one says, but she hasn't said that. Okay, that's captured by this too. the content of phi and psi includes as a part the content of phi, but it's not the case, that's invalid, that the content of phi includes the content of phi over psi. It entails that, but it doesn't include that content. So the content of conjunction includes not just entails that of conjuncts, but the content of disjunct does not reverse include that of the disjunction, even though it entails that in the semantics that I just gave you. They also tell us why the other disjunct can bring in an extra topic, can be partially off topic. Yabo said, phi or psi can say less about more than phi. The disjunction can address a larger topic than the one of these disjuncts, even while being less informative. It rules out fewer circumstances, whereas phi and psi can say more about more with respect to phi. That's a common idea in topic-sensitive semantics. It says Yablo, paradigm of content inclusion, it means content inclusion, is the relation that simple conjunctions bear to their conjuncts. The relation snow is white and expensive bear, for example, to snow is white. A paradigm of non-inclusion is the relation that disjuncts bear to disjunctions. Snow is white does not have snow is white or expensive as a part. It finds as the same. A guiding principle behind the understanding of partial content is that the content of A and B should each be part of the content of A and B, and that the content of A or B should not in general be part of the content of either A or B. Aisha says Scottish grass is green. Bethany says Scottish grass is green, and it is green. This sounds not as redundant, right? You may have a pragmatic explanation. Maybe Bethany wanted to stress how green Scottish grass is. It rains a lot. But that's redundant content because what Bethany said is what Aisha just said. That's captured by that. So phi says the same as phi and phi. Bethany is sticking to what has been said redundantly. Maybe she wanted to stress that how green Scottish grass is. Aisha says Midori is an accountant as a football player. Bethany says Midori is a football player and as an accountant. Bethany aimed to convey that playing football is what matters for Midori, maybe. That's pragmatics again. But what she says is just what Aisha has said. Yeah. That's captured by that equivalence, which is valid in semantics. Phi and psi says the same as psi and phi. Of course, that only works when and encodes orderly insensitive to its functional conjunction, right? Lots of conjunctions have a temporal element. Like she went to the hospital and got sick. She got sick and went to the hospital. I mean, but that's a different case. Aisha says Midori is happy. She has not thereby said that Midori is happy, and either Midori is happy or extremely disconnectedness is no hereditary property of topological space. Phi captures this. Phi doesn't include as a part of its content phi and phi of psi. Aisha says the car is out of fuel. She has not thereby said it's not the case that the car has fuel, but the gauge is stuck. Takes captures that. Phi doesn't include as a part, not phi and psi. Now, this is an example which is used in epistemology when people debate epistemic closure. So when we know something, we are in a position to know what the logical consequences of what we know. More famous example, you know it's a zebra, you're not positioned to know that if no cleverly this guy's new. Okay. It's a zebra, it's not the case that it's not a zebra and it's a cleverly this guy's new. Like this, because when I do epistemic logic hyperintentionally, that's going to be very important. That's going to be a clever way to invalidate epistemic closure. We're going to talk about this next week. Yeah, you may have guessed what that takes us when I bring in knowledge of belief ascriptions. These final four, and then I will stop. They give the core of the semantics. These are four validities which are very characteristic and explanatory. 7 and 8 express the transparency of the truth functional logical vocabulary that says phi and not phi have the same topic, they're about the same stuff. That's a validity. 8 says phi and psi, phi or psi, same topic. Whatever phi is about plus whatever psi is about. That's another validity. That grass is green, that grass isn't green are about the same topic. That Carlos is short and handsome, and that Carlos is handsome and short. Sorry, that should have been that Carlos is short or handsome. They're about the exact same. 9 and 10 give the hyperintentional features of the semantics. they allow for topic diverging co-necessities, because that 9 says phi is necessary and psi is necessary. It doesn't follow that they're about the same things. 10 says necessarily if phi and psi, so they're co-intentional, it doesn't follow that they're about the same. Okay, so that t plus 2 plus 4, that t plus 3 plus 6 are both necessary but about different things. That vixens are primary foxes and that clopin sets are both open and closed, same. That is knows and that it's true that is knows, they're about different things too, even though they are co-intentional. Okay, that was a quick presentation of my simple two-component semantics. And what I will start to do next week is add to the language operators that express knowledge, belief, conditional belief, supposition as operators on these propositions. Okay, and then we can start doing hyperintentional epistemic logic, formal epistemology with these simple account of contents. Good, that's what I have to say for today. Thanks. So we want to have a little break, like this. Yeah, like 10-minute break, and then we continue.
So it is part of a theory of content to explain our intuitions about what sentences and thoughts are about. Standard possible word semantics doesn't account for that. Therefore, standard possible word semantics is at least insufficient. So that would be a dialect. Yeah. So my general question is about what moves could or does Tim Williamson make against the first premise. I can imagine someone saying, look, of course, there are very interesting things to say and think about aboutness, but it's probably not part of a theory of content. So here's an analogy. It's not a perfect analogy, but it's just to invite you to develop more your views on that, which is in the old school philosophy of language, there was this Kaplanian distinction between meta-semantics and semantics. And you could say what our thoughts and utterances are about is part of meta-semantics. They tell you what the reference fixing factors are that don't, and that gives you that, and don't mix semantics with aboutness. So what would you say to this? I'm pretty sure that you have something to say, but I would like to see more about how you see the connection between semantics and aboutness.
Yeah, good. That's a very good question. So I think everybody would agree that this idea of contents and also thoughts being about something is worth investigating and interesting and so on. There's no disagreement there, of course. The disagreement is on where you locate these phenomena in the standard distinction between semantics, pragmatics, that intermediate level highlighted by Williamson of epistemology and epistemic procedures that we put in place, where you locate that. I think that's a disagreement. So should it belong to semantics or should it belong to epistemology broadly conceived? Okay. Well, there's no fast reply to that question, because I think the way the debate should unfold is by coming up with some account of these phenomena and see what the theoretical virtues of the account are, and that immediately becomes very complex. What are the shortcomings? What are the data which are good but missing? Which data can be explained away? So the debate is bound to be complicated. For instance, Yablo has this book that I love, Aboutness, which is all about the idea that subject matter should be a component of content, distinct from truth conditions as the standard possible semantics. Okay, he has a long series of motivations of why, if you admit that subject matters are a component of content, you give a better account than if you relegate them in the outside of content, because it shows that the phenomena are systematic. They need a systematic unified explanation that the rival cannot provide. Or, for instance, a clear point of disagreement may be the following. I think Williamson is going to say that the things that he would invoke to explain this phenomena, and typically there's going to be guises or modes of presentation, they're not compositional. So they don't embed compositionally. Whereas because we put them in the semantics, we're committed to giving a compositional account of them, which I did at least in this simple propositional case, because I have topics that embed composition. So the topic of a composite claim is a function of the topic of the components. Okay. So should it be compositional or not? He should come up with a story to the effect that it's not compositional and provide evidence. We can stick to our idea that you can give a compositional account. I think that's how the dialectic unfolds. But there's no quick answer to the. I think the question is bound to be very complicated, and I think the way to address that issue is come up with an account of this phenomena. So what contents and thoughts can be about. See whether an account which could put aboutness outside semantics, or it could put aboutness inside semantics, and see what the theoretical explanatory virtues of the account are. And you assess the accounts by the usual philosophical ways to do theory choice. How simple is that? To what extent it explains our intuitions, what applications it has, and so on. That's how I think that the debate should unfold. Yeah.
Want to follow up?
A short thing is just that I was also thinking that you wanted to consider a lot and make your life easy by saying, I just need a couple of counterexamples that are stable.
Yeah.
And that's all I need.
Yeah.
But it turns out that after your reply, it seems to be more difficult.
Yeah, no, in a sense, that's right. Yes.
And so that's one thing. And the other thing is that it seems to me that then you might end up collapsing the argument about aboutness and the other epistemic issues that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Second thing, I don't quite know what to say. I think we can get back to talking about that when I've added operators who believe knowledge and so on. And you see whether I'm putting into the semantics something that should not go there. So on the first point, I mean, I think I agree. What I said was, well, it's enough for some counterexample to survive. But then I added, well, if Williamson wants this to be a general strategy to explain away all putative hyperintentional phenomena, he may, as I said, he may have a different, and I suspect he has a different strategy. He's going to go for something like some of these intuitions to the effect that content is hyperintentional can be explained away in this fashion. Some other intuitions have to be explained away in some other way. So he's going to have, I think he's going to have a divide and conquer strategy. So I don't really want to be in, if some counterexample survives, then Williamson is done, because I'm sure that Williamson's strategy against hyperintentionality is way more articulate.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a question by Axel.
Okay. Oh, this is great. But I'm gonna present a challenge to your account in the form of a dilemma. Okay. Can you go back to some of the examples you used to
sure.
push your intuition that yes, we're capturing same.
Oh wait, do you want to have my initial list of examples?
No, the example you used to pump the intuition that yes, your formalization captures.
Oh yeah, okay. So this was the list of validities, but I don't know which ones you know.
Like something like this.
Okay.
No, the next one. When you have no, when you more addition. More.
I think.
Okay, something like that.
Yeah.
I think on the last one.
Phi and psi, psi and phi.
Yeah, sin phi is easier.
This one. The ones at the end. Those are really those are the ones that I care about the most.
Okay, perfect. This is good. This is good. Okay, but yeah, conjunction is tricky. Disjunction, I think, is more interesting. Okay, so the example you commonly use to keep the intuitions that you are capturing our strong intuitions about the topic neutrality of operations, are all examples in which every element in the formula corresponds to an explicit element of the sentence, right? Every disjunction has an or, every phi corresponds to a sentence, etc. Okay, right. So this presents a dilemma. Either it is because you think that every sentence of the form phi and psi has to have this syntactic form, or not. Okay, so if the first one, then you don't seem to have you don't seem to be having an argument against those who say, well, you see, topicality is not about content, it is about syntax.
Oh, okay, got it.
Okay, if you go the other way around and say like, no, we're going to have some sentences that are going to have like, they're going to be conjunction even though there's not an and, they're going to be disjunction even though there's not an or, then I think when you present those, you're going to lose a lot of the intuitiveness of your judgments.
Got it. Okay, so first of all, this is supposed to give an account of same thing for sentences of natural language, but it proceeds the usual way. So you start by some kind of translation or regimentation into the formal notation.
Yes.
Okay, so how you translate a natural language sentence into that? Well, it depends. So if you have a conjunction in ordinary language that looks like truth functional conjunction, then you translate that with a formula which is a conjunction in your formal language. But if it's a conjunction that looks like an operator that encodes a temporal ordering, then you don't want to translate that in this way. Okay. So this said, topics are not syntactic items. They are things which are inside the models. I admit that they're very abstract, so I didn't tell you anything about topics are, and I don't care because that's all I need is a bunch of things that work as topics, and those constraints that ensure the topic transparency of the connectives to get the logic going, and also the model epistemic logics that I will present next week. But they're just things in the, let me see. Oh yeah, that's important. They're just things out there in the model. They're not pieces of language. And the semantics works in such a way that distinct atoms can get the same topic. Okay, that's a mark of semantics as opposed to reproducing mere syntax. So it's not that the topic of an atom is like the atom or a piece of language, and then the topic of a conjunction is very much like the topic of the very formulas conjoined by a conjunction. The topic is a thing out there.
Good.
It's not a piece of language. Okay, that's crucial because I mentioned that maybe I say something like that. It's one of the common talks. There's a family of filter logics which work in a way similar to this semantics here. They're a small family of relevant logics called containment logics. That's basically normal model logic plus a filter. And the filter is a syntactic filter. And Routley made heavy weather against that. He basically killed at the time that old little family of relevant logic by saying, oh, this is just a syntactic relevance filter imposed on normal model logic. So basically your entailment is valid when all the atomic formulas of the consequent are atomic formulas of the antecedent. Okay. And he said, oh, that's just a syntactic filter on top of normal model logic. That objection doesn't work here because that's stuff in the semantics. And distinct atoms can have the same topic.
Okay, but then of the dilemma, you're going to go for the first one.
I think it's a false. That sounds like a false dilemma.
Okay, can you tell me?
Yeah, because once I mean, you're gonna have to start with some regimentation of literal language into this stuff. Okay, and then you got your formal language into which you have translated your sentences from literal language. Okay. Once you have them in your formal language, you give them a semantics. Okay. And the semantics works in such a way that it assigns truth sets and topics to atoms, and then recursively it assigns truth sets and topics to complex formulas. And all that is assigned is not pieces of language, it's just stuff in the semantics. So I don't think that's just copying the syntax.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Simon, I think you raised your hand.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, really interesting. I had a question about, I think it was claim 8 of the semantics.
Okay.
So this was the claim, I think, that the conjunction of phi and psi is the same topic, but has the same topic as the disjunction.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if that ultimately might lead us to identifying propositions that we want to keep distinct.
Oh, okay. So it's too coarse-grained. It's not fine-grained enough.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, particularly in cases where phi and psi are tautologies, distinct tautologies or distinct contradictions. So I guess I was thinking, maybe I've just gone wrong somewhere, but I was thinking, so suppose that phi is not A implies A.
Yeah.
And psi is not A and not A. So they're the same topic. The conjunction of those is the same topic as the disjunction of those.
Yeah.
If they really are tautologies, which I suppose they are, then they're true in all the same worlds. So that the disjunction of them and the conjunction of them expresses the same proposition. Nevertheless, if I'm an intuitionist, I would believe the disjunction but not believe the conjunction. So
perfect.
That's evidence that we want to
perfect.
Proposition.
Good. I'll come back to this more than once. That's a very good question. So that account gives you that, well, all necessary truth / necessary falsehood conjoined or disjoined with the same topic gets the same content.
Right.
That's what may be felt not to be sufficiently fine-grained.
Right.
Yes. Yeah, that is totally right. But what exactly is the problem? So if the problem is that, as you mentioned, that if you are an intuitionist, then blah, 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 so you want those contents to be distinct. You may believe one and not the other. Okay. Actually, I think it's a good selling point of this semantics that because the two components are independent, you can change one and keep the other one fixed and accommodate the intuitionist. Then you're changing the logic, but that's where you go if you want to help the intuitionist. Because notice that this account is pretty standard in the sense that, there you go. So this is just standard modal logic with possible world semantics and the entailment defined the standard way. So it's classical modal logic. I just add the topics to make all the hyperintentional distinctions that I want to make. So this is classical logic beefed up on steroids. So if you're not a classical logician, of course you're not gonna be happy with the content that I identify. But it's not too difficult to tweak the logic, and instead of having normal modal logic, which has a base classical non-modal logic, you can have an intuitionistic logic with topics. And then those two contents that you want to be distinct are going to be distinguished, not because I changed the topic structure, but because I changed the truth conditions. So now the truth conditions are different. Okay. So if that's the way to accommodate non-classical logicians, fine by me. I mention this again and again because the whole book is like that. The whole book is very classical and normal modal logic with various bells and whistles, similarity relation of worlds, plausibility relations between worlds, and so on and so forth. And on top of that, subject matters. That was the project of the book. Take normal modal logic, add subject matters, and see what you get. By making hyperintentional distinctions. So in a sense, it's very conservative. Because I wanted to fight one battle at a time, it's already hard to convince classical logicians to go non-classical. I said, let's not go non-classical. Let's just stay classical and show the virtues of subject matters.
Okay. Hang on, so even if I'm a classical logician, shouldn't I still want...
I think if you're a classical logician, then it's different. I think it's more controversial that you want those contents to be distinct.
Okay.
If you're an intuitionist logician, I see why you may want those contents to be distinct, but then I'm just going to tell you, okay, if you want to go that way, just change my classical model logic, throw in your intuitionistic logic, and there you go. And then that equivalence is going to fail, for instance, conjunction, because then, of course, your understanding of conjunction and disjunction is different. People would say that the intuitionistic operators are modal, okay, heavily modal. And then it makes sense that they are not even topic transparent. Because I told you, I'm fighting for the idea that the extensional logical vocabulary is topic transparent. But if you have a modal, conditional, and so on in your language, that doesn't, because I mean, also the box of necessity. 2 + 2 = 4, necessarily 2 + 2 = 4. They seem to be about different topics. Okay. Yeah. So.
Luis, please.
Yes, thank you. My question was very close to that of Simon. So can you go back to this list of validities?
Yeah, sure. There you go.
That one, yes. So just say, well, this need not be classical. You can simply plug your non-classical
Yes.
in the truth,
Yeah.
truth conditions, and voila. But my concern is that that kind of non-classical logician is very classical. Just, I will use the example of the intuitionist using this machinery of cryptic models. Is just the classical way of making intuitionistic model.
So
So in a sense, if you are committed to non-classical logician, think of relevance application, you need to modify other parts of the semantics as well. For example, you have number 3 there, which is very contraction. It's a form of contraction, so you maybe need to track where that form of contraction comes from.
yes,
And maybe that comes from the fusion.
Yeah.
And then you need to think of the fusion of thought in a relevance way.
right.
So I'm not sure that merely changing the truth conditions will make for this kind of non-classical, committed non-classical logician.
Point taken. I think I agree. So the kind of intuitionist who is easily accommodated by changing those conditions is the intuitionist who's fine with Kripke semantics, and Kripke semantics for intuitionistic logic, I mean, which hardcore intuitionists may not like at all. Relevant logicians are unlikely to be happy with this because they can already make all of those hyperintentional distinctions just by using the relevant semantics. So that's also right. So yeah, I didn't mean to say that I can accommodate any non-classical logician who's unhappy with this setting by just tweaking the truth conditions. Yeah, no, that's point. There's some Dictada, for instance, and somebody else are starting to explore how this kind of approach that uses subject matters and topics connects to traditional relevant logic. I think also Sean Standifer is getting into that. So that's good, but that's all very, in court, it's just started. So I can't say where that's going to go. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Well, Santiago had raised his hand, but
It's fine.
it's fine, but I wonder if I missed any other raised hands before. I wouldn't know, and
I'm a little worried about this notion of aboutness. I don't quite completely grasp it. Jarlo's paraphrases of on something that concerns something, that addresses something. But there's another notion of aboutness that is very fine-grained, which is that mentions something.
Okay.
And that's problematic because it might be too fine-grained for purposes. In Mexico, probably also in Italy, we have a saying, I say this to John so that Paul can understand. What am I talking about? About whom am I talking about? Am I talking about John or about Paul? Well, literally about John, but everybody understands, if they understand at all, that I'm talking about the one I'm not mentioning.
Yeah.
Now, all the examples that you gave us, I think, could be understood as what you mentioned.
Yeah. Okay.
Can you give us an example when you are talking about the same topic, but not mentioning?
Oh, right. Yeah. That's another great question. So different people who work on subject matters some people tend to connect the subject matter of a sentence very tightly to the things mentioned in the sentence. Some people have a way looser connection. I'm one of those who tend to connect the subject matter of a sentence very tightly to stuff mentioned in the sentence. But I mean, when people introduce subject matters, they speak about conversational topics. And what a sentence can be about in a loose sense in a conversation can be very remote from what's explicitly mentioned in the sentence. So that's what that's why it's a very good question. So one may have a loose, especially people who tie very strictly, not very strictly, very loosely subject matters to what sentences are about, are the people who connect them to questions the sentence can be taken as answering to in conversation. Because after all, I can answer a question by using a certain sentence, which is very remote to what the question is more directly about. So I can say, example that I use often, take the sentence, Matt is a communist. That sentence can be used in conversation to answer very different questions. It can answer to the question, who's a communist? Matt is a communist. Or it can answer the question, tell me something about Matt. Matt is a communist. And even the difference in focus matters, because they're saying, Matt is a communist. That's an literal answer to the question, tell me something about Matt. Okay. But if I say, Matt is a communist, that sounds more literally as an answer to the question, who's a communist in the room? But it can also answer very indirectly to questions like, I can ask, does Matt believe in God? And I say, look, Matt is a communist, right? So on some accounts of subject matters, the subject matter of a sentence taken as the question to which the sentence can answer in conversation can be very remote from what is explicitly mentioned in the sentence. And one of those, we tend to connect subject matters more strictly to what is explicitly mentioned in the sentence. Kit Fine is more in that area. Because for him, subject matter is given by truth makers, states. Okay, so Snow is White is about that state of affairs, which is Snow being white. Okay, that thing. Okay. But I think there's kind of a continuum of position, or there are positions in the middle. Okay. So as it is now, I think it is fairly strictly connected to, in a sense, so if you look at the functional composites, the connection is very strict. In a way, the connection that I gave to you is loose here because my account of subject matters is so abstract that the subject matter of an atomic sentence can be anything, because it's just a thing in a semantic which is assigned to it. So I'm very neutral on that. But so that there are all of these different options. But I totally agree with you that there's a sense of aboutness and subject matter and so on, in which the subject matter of a sentence can be very removed or very far away from what's explicitly mentioned in the sentence. Yeah. The literature on this is developing right now. So there's an account by Matteo Plebani and Spolaore, which accounts for the focus of sentences by using subject matter. So they think that focus makes a difference in subject matter. So for them, Matteo is a communist, one subject matter. Matteo is a communist, another subject matter. I don't want to go that far, for instance. But yeah.
Is it a follow-up? Okay.
Just a follow-up for clarification, because as Danilo brought the concern and aboutness, so what about what is not explicitly represented in things like, so it's raining, and what happens with time would be part of the topic or not, or depending, and if you open it.
I don't know. So I don't want to take a stance on any of these things. I know this is disappointing, but the semantics is presented in such an abstract fashion because it allows me to remain neutral on all of these things on which there's a lively debate in subject matter sensitive semantics. I just put as much structures as I need to get the epistemic logic started, the ones that I will present starting next week. That's the thing. One thing on which I clearly take a stance is that the topic transparency of the extensional vocabulary. That's something on which I clearly take a stance. So not and or in the extensional sense, they're about nothing. And already that gets me into trouble because then I get objections from people who say, oh, no, negation should be about something and so on. So it's hard to define that minimal commitment. But I want to be neutral on as much as I can as for the rest. Yeah.
There's a second follow-up and then Marian.
Yeah, a very general suggestion. So there is this debate, I think Sebas was pointing to that debate between people who like unarticulated constituents.
Yes.
And those who think
Yeah.
everything is articulate.
Yeah.
And then you have this distinction that Perry draws between, on the one hand, being about something,
Yeah.
and on the other, concerning something.
Yeah.
And I think that even though you don't want to take a stance on that, you would like to represent and make sense of that debate.
Yeah.
And I think it would go in your direction, because one of the motivations for that distinction is to make our semantics sensitive to our cognitive limitations. So you have this beautiful example or thought experiment by Perry of the sea laners.
Mm-hmm.
So these people who don't travel anywhere,
Mm-hmm.
they just live in sea land, they never go to other places. So when they say it is raining, you evaluate that sentence in relation to the location, but you don't have to articulate it.
Yeah.
Because they don't travel.
Yeah.
Once they start to travel, you need something more in the structure, more explicit. So if you want to capture these differences of what Recanati calls cognitive innocence.
Yeah.
So, and when you become less innocent about some parameters, then you might want to capture that.
Got it.
So
Okay.
So that's,
Yeah, that helps a lot.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, Maria, please.
Thank you. I have I think methodological question when one is thinking about rationality. It seemed to me when you were answering to Simon and to Luis that you have, in a sense, a strong commitment with the idea that this interintentionality toolbox that refers to topics is linked strongly to particular logics. And my concern is that in the large majority of cases, when we are talking about rationality, one should agree with Herman and should be very open about the type of logic that is closing at least a particular set of pieces of information or a reasoning path or something like that. So I was wondering whether that is a flexible aspect of your proposal in such a way similar to, for instance, adaptive logics, which we all recognize as a type of logic, but they are so open to the logical consequence that we can commit and still emphasize the nature, for instance, in this case, how important topics are and things like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So what I'm going to give you starting next week is a family of epistemic logics, where the contents of attitudes like belief, knowledge, and so on are propositions so understood. Okay, thick propositions engaged with topics. And I claim that you can model a number of, you can make a number of distinctions. You can represent, for instance, that one believes that phi, one doesn't believe that psi, even when they are co-intentional, because they are about different things. Okay, and that may be interesting to model for different reasons. They may be normative reasons, but they may not be normative reasons, whatever your favorite account of normativity is. For instance, you may have a Harmanian view of rationality, which is, well, sometimes it's, you believe that phi, it's not rational for you to come to believe that psi, even though phi and psi are co-intentional, because it would be a waste of cognitive resources and time. It would clutter your mind with useless sequences if you went that way. Okay, so if you have this Harmanian view of rationality, I'm going to try to sell to you the point that this is a good way to model that. But it may be that you want to model that situation, not because you have a Harmanian view of rationality, but because you want to model a different phenomenon. So for instance, you believe that phi is intentionally equivalent to psi. You don't believe that psi because you lack certain concepts. So you're even unable to grasp those contents. So you cannot have any attitude towards those contents. So you believe that 2 + 2 = 4. You don't believe that Fermat's last theorem is true, okay? Because you don't know what Diophantine equations are. So you lack that concept, okay? That's another thing which is usually usefully modeled in this kind of account. Is that a normative deficiency? So should you be on top of all concepts? If you think that you should, that's a normative view, fine. Okay? So I should say, yeah, I'm rather liberal on normativity issues, in the sense that I will model certain things. Do you want that model to have normative force? Do you want it to be merely descriptive? As you please. But I'll be more specific when I come to the specific logic that I will that I will give you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, great, and we have another question for Alexis.
Just a short question. Why are you making topics and truth condition independent of each other? Isn't it intuitive that they would have to be related somehow? Right?
Related, yes.
Okay.
Reducible, so there is no function
Yes, of course.
that takes one and gives you the other or the other way around. I'm working on a paper with Peter and Levin on that. So I have arguments to the effect that the two should be reducible to each other in the technical sense, that there is no function that takes you from truth conditions to topics, and there is no function that takes you from topics to truth conditions. I have something in that chapter 2 of the book that I mentioned, the Topics of Thought book. And there the story is, we also have a specific example. And basically the idea is that it seems intuitive that even epistemically ideal speakers sometimes can be on top of the truth conditions of the claim, and they're not in a position to recover what the claim is about only from the truth conditions. Mm-hmm. And the other way around, even epistemically ideal speakers can be on top of the topic, but they are not in a position to recover the truth conditions. So you can have a look at the kind of story that we tell in chapter 2 of the book.
But it's not going to be in your future talks of the Cátedra.
No, I can talk about that if you like. Yeah, it's not in the slides that I prepared, but I can get back to that. Because I need to give you the exact argument, otherwise it's going to be sloppy if I just now come up with the story. Anyway, I can send you. So we have this paper under review, and I'm happy to share the paper with anyone who's interested. So it's a paper that argues explicitly against what we call one component semantics. One component, which is the view that either subject matters are reducible to truth conditions or the other way around, truth conditions are reducible to subject matters. Because that paper has been rejected by a couple of referees who were, I think, Kittfein truthmaker semanticists. Because we think that the Kittfein semantics is naturally read as a one component semantics. So we're arguing against exact truthmaker semantics. So we're arguing against a lot of people. But there's other people in that ballpark who think that you can understand Kittfein semantics as a two-component semantics. So one referee said, your arguments are wrong. And the other referee said, yeah, you're arguing against the straw man because truthmaker semantics is actually a two-component semantic. So I'm happy to share the paper. Don't put it online because it's still under review. But if you send me an email, I'll send the paper. So yes, we have arguments for the two components being irreducible to each other. Thank you.
Okay, Miguel Angel?
Yeah, it's all actually. I wasn't able to follow the details in the sketch of the arguments. But one idea that was in the back of my head when I was hearing is why not just using topics? That I guess is one of the reasons to have a single component. Because sometimes in your examples, in some of the examples, topics were parts of the word, like triangularity.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking, well,
maybe negation is not part of the word, right?
Yeah, so maybe some of them are parts of the world, then I can recover the other parts.
Yeah.
So there are, if topics are properties, for example, then I can recover words from different properties. So that gives a limitation for at least for what topics are in some intuitive cases. And I think that
could be a way to go. I don't think it's the one we pursue explicitly. The argument is to the fact that that truth conditions are reducible to topics. We argue that that's independently implausible because if you accept that snow is white and snow is not white have the same topic, which are committed to if you buy topic transparency, then they're going to have the same truth conditions, which is ridiculous. The other way around is more complicated. It's more complicated to argue that topics are irreducible to truth conditions. We have a roundabout argument that tries to show that you can't claim that and still stick to the topic transparency of negation, conjunction, disjunction, which Kittfein does stick to, because Kittfein buys the view that negation, conjunction, and disjunction don't add subject matter of their own. Yeah, that's how.
Yeah, just to follow. I think just to just to be clear about what the position is, because you say, well, they are irreducible to each other, and then you go, therefore they're independent. But they're like
Yeah, almost. Yeah, I don't mean
Okay.
nobody. Diablo is a two-component approach.
Okay.
We all two-component people could allow all sorts of important relations between truth conditions and subject matters. For instance, in the Diablo setting, the subject matter it's just like the Lewis setting, more or less. He uses divisions, not partitions, so he allows overlap.
Yeah.
But the Diablovian subject matter is a division of the set of possible worlds. So the connection is obvious because you use possible worlds to give truth conditions, and you also take the set of possible worlds, and the divisions on them are the subject matters. So there are lots of relations between truth conditions and subject matters in Diablo, but there is no function that maps either to the other. So in that sense, they are irreducible. So we don't want to deny that there are lots of important relations between topics and truth conditions. Yeah.
Is it a follow-up? Oh,
If there is time.
what?
An original question, not a follow-up.
Well, my question may be a little bit off topic, but I was wondering where philosophically, methodologically, this kind of theory of yours fits in with respect or in relationship with other studies of aboutness.
Yeah.
So, for instance, even standard semantics, as usually takes care of some part of the phenomena, but usually to understand whether someone's words in some language or someone's thoughts, whatever they're made out of, actually have certain truth conditional properties. That's a standard kind of model that's compositional based on the reference, the application or designation of concepts or words. And usually that's studied by some kind of foundational semantics, and it's a different area, right? Right? So, but I was just thinking, obviously the standard possible word semantics does not distinguish in a fine grade enough way things. On the other hand, these other studies, which are studying a different thing, right? Like these foundational semantics, like causal theories, let's say, of mental content. To give just one example, and there's many of them: telesemantics, historical causal descriptive, his own proposal in naming and necessity. Those studies are trying to anchor meaning, content, right, in a way that is obviously centered around topics, right? Because there's going to be certain kind of relations that anchor my predicate cat, or is a cat to
stuff out there in the world. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So how would you think of the relationship? Would those studies be providing kind of a causal underpinnings of these more abstract semantics? And maybe, because I was thinking this aboutness has been at the center stage of those studies, and on the other hand, it's a little bit strange that the mainstream formal semantics has been totally disconnected from that, right? Because as you show very well, the opinions are not fine-grained enough.
Yeah, good question. So I have no idea. So this very abstract setting, I have no idea how it may, if at all, be connected to a number of accounts on how language hooks out to the world causally, telesemantically, or so. I don't think there's a lot of work in subject matter semantics on that already. There is an amount of work on how, I mean, it's mostly negative results, but how subject matter sensitive semantics is connected to how reference works. That's the way you connect to the world, right? So names refer to things. How do they get their reference? Causal theory. Okay, you start referring, and then we intend to keep the original reference, like a Kipnian story. Then you have negative results, because early accounts of subject matters provided by people like Gilbert Ryle, here's a paper called about this, Goodman and so on. So for them, what a sentence is about is what the substantial terms, so the terms refer to. So in that sense, the connection was very simple and clear. But of course, it doesn't work because John is happy and John is a lawyer. They have different subject matters, but in both cases, the referent of the name can be the same guy, John. And there's an early account by Perry, I think, which goes like, well, take the reference of all the substantial components. So not just singular terms, include the predicates. So what John loves Mary is about is given by John, the relation between John and Mary. Okay, so it's the reference of the substantial components that fixes the button. But it doesn't work either because the example is from Diablo. Dog bites man, man bites dog. They're about man, dog biting, but one is a more interesting subject matter than the other one, right? So dog bites man, that doesn't go in the front page of the newspaper. Man bites dog does. So more interesting subject matter is a different subject matter. So the take-home message from Jablok, it's fine, is it's not only what you talk about that matters, the things you talk about, but also what you say about them. So you may be talking about the same things, but you're still saying different things about them. So subject matters is not easily reducible to the denotations or the reference of the substantial components. And at that point, things become complicated. The reason why I bought the transparent account of the functional connectives is that's one of the few things of which there's agreement, not complete, but there's broad agreement between subject matter. So fine, Diablo, Peter Hoke, and a few other people. Already, when you get to the aboutness of the substantial components of sentences, that's a total mess. So there is no agreed upon account of how subject matter works for the first order language. So they have predicates, variables, quantifiers, and names. So we're not there yet. So see, yeah, that's all I can say. It's a new topic. Topics. We need a little bit of time.
Well, we've run out of time, unfortunately, but thank you so much, Brian.
Thanks a lot.